The little boy recoiled while crying out, eyes wide with terror, tears streaming down his cheeks, not because anyone had hurt him, but simply because a few drops of water had splashed onto his feet. And then right there on the deck of the luxury yacht, Serenity Blue, a young waitress suddenly knelt down and opened her arms to embrace him. No one called her. No one gave permission. Yet what happened next silenced even the hardest of hearts. That very girl who had once been so afraid of water that it made her cry, nodded her head and stepped into the pool with a complete stranger. And that seemingly trivial moment changed the lives of 3 people forever. The late afternoon sun swept across the deck of the Serenity Blue, bathing every teak bench and railing in a dreamy golden hue reminiscent of old cinema. Gentle waves lapped against the hull, blending with the clink of glassware, refined laughter, and the faint strains of jazz. It was the picture of a perfect vacation, at least for everyone aboard except one person. At the far end of the deck, behind the row of teak loungers, a 9-year-old boy sat motionless. Liam wore a white polo shirt with the sleeves rolled up, canvas shoes dusted with sand, but his gaze was the one thing that did not look childlike. It was dim, heavy as though belonging to someone who had survived, not merely grown up. Each time someone plunged into the midship pool, the splash sounded like a gunshot in the boy's head. He did not scream. He did not resist. He simply recoiled, as if his survival instincts had been triggered, as if he himself were falling once again. A few paces away stood Nathaniel Brooks. He held a glass of whiskey on the rocks, lips lightly pressed together, shoulders tense, the kind of tension born of someone used to controlling everything, yet, at this moment, powerless. In Miami, he was known as the Market Reverser, the man who once sealed the takeover of an entire resort with a single handshake. But before this child, before that silent fear, he seemed invisible. This trip was no accident. Nathaniel had spent 3 months rearranging his meeting schedule, turned down $3 million projects, even skipped the annual Entrepreneur of the Year gala at the Ritz just to bring his son onto this ship. The Serenity Blue was more than luxurious. It carried the fragile hope that water, seen in a different light, might once again become a place of safety. Yet with each passing day, he realized, you cannot force a child to believe that their fear is unreasonable. A year ago, Liam had watched his mother vanish beneath a capsized boat. He never spoke of it. But since that day, water had become an enemy. He refused to step near the pool, avoid the railings, even shied away from washing his hands in a basin if he heard the drip of water. Nathaniel had tried everything: therapy, adrenaline rush activities, elaborate father-son adventures. Nothing worked. That afternoon, when the light tilted as if touching the edge of the sky, a rubber ball bounced out from a group of children playing by the pool and rolled straight to Liam's feet. It was just a ball. But the boy jumped back and burst into tears. Not loudly, not violently, just small, choked sobs repeated over and over like waves pounding an unyielding wall. Some nearby adults turned to look. Nathaniel set down his glass, ready to step forward. But before he could move, a young woman in a black uniform appeared at his son's side. She did not hurry. She did not rush. She simply knelt gently before Liam, spoke no words at first, and did not touch him immediately. One hand hovered and then settled softly on his shoulder as one might place a hand on a warm stone heated by the Sunday, and then, in an unexpected gesture, Liam did not pull away. He leaned in and nestled against her. Silence spread like a rising tide. Everyone who witnessed that scene, even Nathaniel, stood frozen. No one knew who she was. No one understood exactly what had happened. Yet one thing was crystal clear. The boy had stopped crying. His chest no longer heaved. And in his eyes, for the first time in months, there was more than fear. There was something else, Perhaps not trust, but relief. Nathaniel remained still, his hand clenched into a fist, then relaxed. Not out of anger, but astonishment. This young waitress, neither doctor nor specialist, just a server, had somehow done what he had failed to achieve in an entire year. And in that still moment, the first change began. Sometimes, what cannot be fixed does not need fixing. It only needs someone gentle enough to sit beside you when you're not yet ready to stand. Have you ever met someone like that?
Welcome to 30 Millionaire Stories, where success meets solitude, and every story heals a hidden wound. Subscribe and discover the heart behind the fortune.
In a hidden corner below the deck, after the guests had retired to their cabins following dinner, Maya Rivera was folding the last napkin at table number 12. She worked as one balances atop the open sea quietly, leaving no trace. Her hands were deft and decisive. Her back was straight, her gaze steady, never wandering nor bowing more than necessary. She belonged to the group of people no one notices, and that made her feel safe. Tonight, the sea surface was calm, but within Maya, waves were stirring. Not because of a long day's work, but because of the moment when that little boy had nestled into her arms as if she were a home. No one asked, and she told no one. Yet the silence that followed that embrace lasted longer than any shift she had ever worked. It made everything, the glassware, the tablecloths, the distant hum of the engines, suddenly seem small, as though that child's heartbeat still pulsed in her arms. Maya was born and raised in Key West, a salt-soaked town at the very end of the Florida Keys. Her childhood was summers with gust force one winds, rainwater trickling into the kitchen through the tin roof, and storm warnings sounding like familiar bells. At age 12, during Hurricane Charlie, when her entire neighborhood was submerged, Maya swam for 3 hours through floodwaters against the current, her hands scratched by rusted metal just to pull her younger sister from the crumbling house. When the rescue teams arrived, they found a gaunt, blue-lipped girl clutching her sister atop a floating door panel, breathing each breath as if counting them. From that day on, she was no longer afraid of the sea. To her, the ocean was neither gentle nor savage. It was simply something one had to cross in order to survive. A year later, Maya earned a swimming scholarship to the Florida Aquatic Academy. She trained as though living a second life, nurturing an Olympic dream with 4 a.m. wake-ups and shoulder-aching evenings that brought tears. But in her second year, a single flawed stroke left her shoulder permanently injured. The dream ended in silence. No one knew. No one asked. Since then, Maya did whatever it took to live. She waited tables, she washed dishes, she taught summer swim lessons. And now, she worked a night shift aboard the Serenity Blue, sending every paycheck home to her sister who was studying marine biology in Gainesville. She never complained, never blamed fate, because at least she still had the sea. Even if now she could only see it through the glass deck panels when pouring drinks for the wealthy. That evening, as the last guests departed, Maya was tidying up when she heard footsteps, unhurried, soundless. She looked up. Nathaniel Brooks, still tall, still refined, his gaze calm yet fathomless. He did not come to scold. He did not offer florid thanks. They sat at the table beside the rail where the sea breeze drifted in, salty enough to make one's spirit waver. Nathaniel asked little. He simply said, "How is it that someone unacquainted, untrained, bearing no professional title, could make my son, a child terrified of water, stop crying?" Maya gazed out at the ocean, her expression unshaken. She answered plainly, her voice steady, "Because I didn't try to teach him anything. I just stayed there, like the sea, never forcing anyone to swim but always ready to hold them when they were." That answer, neither philosophical nor ornate, left Nathaniel silent for a long while. Perhaps for the first time in months, he began to understand not everyone needs a guide. Sometimes, the only thing a person needs is someone who doesn't leave while they're still afraid. The night wind drifted across the chair. The aft deck lights flickered. In the distance, waves tapped gently against the hull. After a silence just long enough, Maya rose. She dipped her head in farewell, then walked away, leaving behind a scent of salt and something ineffable in Nathaniel's heart. Have you ever met someone like the sea who doesn't try to change you, but waits quietly for you to find the courage to return? My dear viewers, stay tuned for the story that will leave you breathless. Please take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and leave a comment below telling me where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always thrilling to see friends joining us from around the world. Early mornings at sea always carry a gentler light than on land. The sun does not rise so much as it emerges from the ocean's depths, bringing with it the night's moisture and the waves' soft, lullaby whispers. On the aft deck of the yacht Serenity Blue, the secondary pool, smaller, out of sight, and never mentioned in any promotional brochure, suddenly became the most important place. Nathaniel had allowed Maya to accompany Liam there each morning before service began. No passers-by, no music, no judgment. Just two souls, one boy with his silent fear, and one woman who had learned how to breathe in the fiercest currents. Yet Maya brought no float, wore no coach's gear. She did not count strokes or assign drills. Instead, she sat on the pool's edge, her feet dangling in the mirror-calm water, and told stories. Sometimes she spoke of coral reefs, their dying colors as seawater warmed. She described the hues they once bore, the creatures that once inhabited them, and how those underwater forests needed to be listened to, not merely studied. Other times, she told of sea turtles, silent voyagers swimming hundreds of miles only to return to the very sands where they were born, to lay their eggs, and then slip back into the sea. They don't know why they come back, Maya would say. They only know their hearts tell them that place is home. Liam did not always reply. He sat beside her, shoulders slightly tense, fingers twisting at the corner of his towel. But he did not leave. Every morning he showed up on time, sat beside Maya, as if her stories were thawing some inner part of him, that part frozen the day the sea took his mother. One morning, a pale mist veiled the sky. The sea lay smooth, as if awaiting someone's touch. Maya led Liam onto the deck earlier than usual. Dawn had not yet broken, only a thin orange line where sea met sky, where the sun still hesitated whether to appear that day. They stood by the railing. Maya spoke little. She simply pointed to the horizon, where sea and sky blurred without a defined boundary. "You know," she said softly, "the sea is never the same as yesterday, yet it never disappears." Liam followed her gaze, eyes half closed against the breeze. A moment passed. Then he nodded slightly. Not because he fully understood, but because something in her words had reached the place in his heart that was mending, piece by piece. He sat down on the pool's edge. Maya did not ask. She gently dipped her own feet in first, and then very slowly Liam rolled up his towel and dipped his feet into the cool early morning water. For the first time since the accident, the boy's feet touched the water, not out of coercion, not for therapy, but simply because he wanted to. His body tensed. Fear still flickered in his eyes, but his hands no longer clutched the edge. He did not hold on to anything. He simply let go. From afar, Nathaniel watched it all. He stood behind the wide glass doors of the lounge, where the wind was too gentle to carry sound, but the light was enough to trace every slight movement. For a moment he considered stepping out, hand already on the door handle, but then he stayed. Because he knew, some steps a father cannot guide by the hand, They must come from within the child, born of something that transcends pain, however small, like a foot touching water. That day, Nathaniel said nothing. He simply watched longer than usual, as if relearning how to wait not to fix his son, but to trust that his son could heal himself. And in the silence of that nameless morning, while the sea still glistened with dew, a boy began to open his first door, not with a key, but with a story. Sometimes the first step to overcoming fear isn't courage, but having someone patient enough to tell you a story every day. Do you remember a story that changed you? Night at sea is nothing like night on land. It is not silent, but seems to whisper in an ancient tongue, making anyone who wakes at 2 a.m. feel strangely small. On the deck of the Serenity Blue, soft floodlights cast a long streak across the water. A distant breeze carries the scent of salt and the gentle lap of waves, reminding one that here time is measured not by hours but by the ocean's own breathing. Nathaniel was still awake. Since last year's accident, he often lay restless nights with the sea so close could easily sweep him into memories. He stood at the upper deck rail, a glass in hand whose ice had long since melted. Below on the secondary deck, he spotted unusual movement. Maya. She wore no uniform, no flashlight, no companion. Alone, she carried a low plastic crate, her figure bent, as if hiding something. Silently, she climbed into a small boat, eased away from the hull, and steered into the dark. Curious? Perhaps. But what drew Nathaniel down was not suspicion, but a feeling he had never seen Maya act this way. He found her not far off, in a still pool sheltered by a reef, where the sea lay mirror-flat. Maya knelt on the damp deck, hands cupped around something precious. Inside the crate was a small sea turtle, its shell scratched, a tangled nylon net wrapped around its flippers. She showed no panic, no anger. She simply began untying the strands, her eyes fixed on the weakened creature. Salt breeze tossed her hair across her cheek. Beads of sweat dotted her forehead. In the moon's quiet glow, she looked less like a server and more like someone born to this place long ago. Nathaniel stepped forward. He did not pretend not to see. "You're breaking ship regulations," he said evenly, but not coldly. Maya looked up, unsurprised. She offered no explanation, spun no touching tale. Only one simple sentence, as direct as her actions. "If I don't help it, by morning it will be dead." Her words seemed to dissolve in the air, soak into the salty mist, and close the distance between them. Nathaniel said nothing further. He sat beside Maya, leaning on the rail. No questions. No touch. Just presence. They sat like that, beside the creature fighting for every breath. When Maya finally released the turtle into the water, it did not swim away at once. It floated there, turning slowly in the night pool, then gradually drifted back toward the open sea as if it understood it had been granted another day. The next morning, no one mentioned last night's rescue. Maya still carried cocktail trays, still bowed her head gently when guests called. Nathaniel still wore his white shirt, still spoke to the captain in his deep baritone. But that afternoon, when Maya emerged from the crew quarters, she found him waiting. No explanations, no list of rules. Nathaniel handed her a small canvas bag inside, gloves, a line-cutting tool, and a chart marking spots where turtles often get trapped. He didn't say, "Come with me," but Maya understood. That evening, they went out again, this time with flashlights, with gear, and for the first time, with shared silence. Between them, it was not merely a rescue, but a true seeing of one another, through actions no one was paid to perform. Back in his cabin, Liam lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He heard the waves beyond the glass door, When Nathaniel entered, the boy whispered, "Dad, are you afraid of the water?" Nathaniel paused, gazing at his son longer than the boy expected. Then he sat down, placing a hand on Liam's knee as if apologizing for a year of silence. "I am," he admitted, "afraid of losing you to it. But tonight, I realized maybe the sea isn't as frightening as I thought. Sometimes, what we fear most is not the ocean itself, but the feeling that we cannot save someone within it. Yet someone willing to bend down can change everything. Have you ever met such a person in your life?" Dear viewers, take a moment to relax or grab a sip of water and stay tuned for the surprising developments ahead. Comment 1 if you enjoyed this story, so we know you're still here. The final night aboard the yacht, Serenity Blue found the sea so calm, it seemed nothing could ever disturb its surface again. String lights stretched across the deck, illuminating bright faces, amber-hued glasses, and crisp, white attire as if lifted from a painting. Guests danced and laughed. The music drifted lightly like a breeze, creating an atmosphere both elegant and full of promise. Yet, at the very edge of the party where the lights were, nothing more than blurred golden streaks on the wooden deck, Liam stood motionless. He wore a neatly tucked white shirt. His hair and collar were perfectly in place. But in his eyes lingered something unnamed, neither fear nor serenity. It was like standing on the brink of a cliff, uncertain whether you would fall or fly. Maya stood beside him. She said nothing, offered no coaxing. She simply remained present, as she always had. A sea breeze lifted strands of her hair from her cheek, but she paid it no mind. Her gaze never left Liam, no pressure, no expectation, just patient watchfulness, as though she trusted he would know when the moment was right. The boy lowered his eyes to the water. Night sea is not as black as one might imagine. It reflected 1,000 lights from the deck, turning into a shifting mirror. Each ripple was a whisper. And among them Liam murmured so softly only Maya could hear, "If I jump, will you catch me?" Maya did not answer at once. She took a single step forward, then another, coming up alongside the rail. Without turning back or meeting his eyes, she spoke just loudly enough that the breeze could not carry her words away. "I'll be waiting under the water." Her reply was a promise needing no confirmation, no justification. A guarantee that no one was forcing Liam to leap, but if he did, someone would be there, not merely to save him, but to bear witness. And then Liam stepped onto the rail. Time stretched beyond any musical beat. A few nearby guests paused. A few surprised looks turned toward him. Nathaniel spun around, his eyes falling on his son's silhouette, this time not behind him, but at the very brink of the water he once feared as an enemy. He meant to run forward, but what happened next moved faster than he could reach the door. Liam jumped. The splash was not loud, yet it resonated to the core of every onlooker. A resolute plunge into the water, not graceful, not perfect, but charged with intention. 1 second, then 2. A ripple blossomed, and Liam broke the surface. Water-soaked hair, eyes wide, mouth split in a grin so broad it almost became a shout. He stretched his arms like a fledgling bird testing its wings, then called up to the deck, "I'm swimming, Dad. I'm really swimming." Applause swelled without orchestration. Tears came not from a child's trembling voice, but from every heart present. Maya waited below, arms ready, but she did not reach out. Nathaniel stood transfixed, not by fear, but by emotion. Something inside him shattered open, neither pride nor relief, but the sensation, for the first time, of truly seeing his son set free. Liam did not swim far, just a few meters, a few earnest strokes, but what mattered most was that he had chosen to. Not by therapy protocol, not by assignment, but by his own heart, the same heart once bound by grief, now daring to believe the ocean could be a friend. Maya remained beside him in the water, silent, yet her smile reached the stars. On deck, no one held back their tears. For that moment was not the triumph of a lesson learned, but living proof that when a child dares to be brave, the world should pause and applaud in quiet respect. Do you remember the first time you stepped beyond your own fear? Sometimes courage needs no reason, just someone waiting beneath the surface. After that final night at sea, Maya no longer showed up for the morning shift. Her figure was absent from the secondary deck where stories of coral once echoed. No one quietly brought a dry towel to place beside Liam's chair. And that breakfast, the peppermint tea, was served by someone else, someone punctual, but whose hands bore none of the sea's salt. The notice arrived early the next morning. Simple, just a few short lines. Maya Rivera suspended for violating internal policy, including using ship resources for personal purposes and engaging in unauthorized personal contact with guests. No accusations beyond that. No defense. Maya did not protest. She simply folded her uniform, gathered her books and small belongings into an old canvas bag. Her face was so calm, it seemed almost silent. When she left the Serenity Blue, she said goodbye to no one, just walked away, her posture straight, her pace unhurried, as if she knew this swell was not the last. 3 days later, Nathaniel appeared in a very different room, the main boardroom of Viridian Marine's executive offices, the company that owns Florida Bay's most luxurious yacht fleet. The atmosphere was taut as a shareholder meeting. Across from him sat a long table of sharp-suit executives clutching notebooks, watches poised on the tabletop, ready to dismiss anything that didn't meet standards. But Nathaniel carried no financial reports, no slides. He opened his laptop and played a single video, unedited, no soundtrack. Just a simple clip. A boy leaping from the yacht's deck, surfacing in open sea, smiling so radiantly the world seemed to pause for a few seconds. Liam, the boy who had once been too terrified to touch the pool's edge. Then Nathaniel placed a folder on the table, a proposal to form the Ocean Soul Foundation, a nonprofit with 2 parallel missions, helping children overcome water-related fears and conserving marine life in high-risk regions. He said little. He left them with one line. Some things cannot be measured in profit, but if we do not protect those who chose to stay when everyone else turned away, who are we? Maya was invited to serve as executive director. No binding contract, no dual conditions, just an invitation like a hand extended, not forced to be taken. She refused. At first, she had learned silence when her old dreams were cast aside, was used to not being chosen, and this time, she did not want to become a symbol. Did not want to sit in a glass office answering interviews about what she once did with only her heart. But then, one afternoon, in her small rented room near Marathon Bay, there was a knock at the door. A courier handed her a thick envelope. No sender indicated. Inside were not papers, but a rough colored pencil drawing. By Liam. He had drawn the sea in looping blue waves, and on the water a woman in a black dress, her hair tied high, embracing a shaft of light. At the bottom, in awkward slanted letters, "You are the light in my ocean." She sat for a long time, not out of emotion, but because for the first time in years, a part of her, the part that swam through floodwaters, that held her sister all night as the water rose, felt seen, not for what she did, but for who she was. 3 days later, Maya called back. No title requested, no office demanded. She only said, "I will do it if we begin with something real for real children and for creatures who've never had proper guardians." Thus, the Ocean Soul Foundation began like a small wave. She organized sea outings for children who had nearly drowned, taught them to listen to the sea rather than conquer it, designed turtle conservation programs at threatened nesting beaches. And whenever Liam stepped ashore, his eyes no longer tense, but shining as though embracing something familiar. Nathaniel did not attend every event, but he was always there behind the scenes, like the wind, like a father who'd learned the greatest lesson, not to teach his child to stand, but to trust that the child will rise if someone gentle stays by their side when fear remains. There are fears that cannot be conquered with reason, but with trust. Trust that someone will be waiting not to pull you out of the water, but to stay in it with you until you have the courage to swim on your own. The story of Liam, Maya, and Nathaniel is not only about the ocean, it is about the journey back to yourself, about finding a home in a stranger, and about how a small heart, when loved in the right way, can grow greater than any wave. If you have ever been afraid, ever felt lost, ever needed someone just to sit beside you in silence, remember, you are not alone. Leave a comment if this story touched you. Hit follow so you don't miss the next healing journeys. And if you know someone who is standing before an ocean in their life, don't hesitate to share this story with them. Because perhaps you will be the light they need. Comment, "I'm ready to swim," if you're ready to believe again.